Blood and silk don't mix, but in the Chicago underworld, they're the only dress code. When the city's most dangerous syndicate boss walked into the Drake Hotel, every woman held her breath. But he didn't look at the runway models. He crossed the ballroom, for the sister everyone threw away. The air in the Gallagher family's Gold Coast penthouse was thick with the scent of hairspray imported French perfume and the sharp underlying metallic tang of nervous sweat. Tonight was the centennial gala at the Drake Hotel, an event that on paper was a charitable fundraiser for the city's orphans. In reality, it was the neutral ground where Chicago's most ruthless crime families, corrupt politicians, and elite businessmen brokered truces, laundered reputations, and arranged marriages. Harley Gallagher stood before the gilded floor-to-length mirror in her bedroom, fighting a losing battle with a zipper. She was a large woman, undeniably fat, with soft, generous curves that the high society dressmakers of Michigan Avenue blatantly refused to accommodate. While her younger sister Chloe was draped in custom-fitted backless crimson silk that clung to her size 2 frame. Like a second skin, Harley had been forced to order an emerald green velvet gown from an out-of-state catalogue. It was beautiful, rich in colour, but the cut was unforgiving, digging into her ribs and clinging to the swell of her stomach and broad hips. "For God's sake, Bea, suck it in!" her father Thomas Gallagher barked from the hallway. Thomas was a mid-level boss, a man who controlled the docks and the union payoffs, but desperately craved a seat at the high table of the syndicate. His face was flushed, the collar of his tuxedo already looking too tight. "We are walking into a room with the Russo family tonight. I cannot have you looking like a stuffed sausage when I am trying to convince Leonard Russo that our bloodline is worth merging with his." Harley dropped her hands, her face burning. "I didn't ask to come, Dad. You know I prefer to stay home. And let the other families think I'm hiding my eldest daughter like some shameful family secret." Thomas snapped. "You do treat her like a family secret, Daddy." Chloe purred, gliding into the room. She looked like a weapon forged from diamonds and malice. Her blonde hair was pinned up in an immaculate twist, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. She looked Harley up and down, a cruel, practiced sneer, lifting the corner of her painted lips. "Look at you. Velvet in June. You look like a Victorian couch, Bay. Just stay by the buffet tonight, out of the way. I need Leonard to be looking at me, not distracted by the circus." Harley swallowed the lump in her throat, her hands smoothing down the rich green fabric over her thighs. "I'll stay out of your way, Chloe. I always do." It was the tragic truth of Harley's life. She was the ghost of the Gallagher family. While Chloe was paraded around as the beautiful bait to lure in a powerful alliance, Harley was the hidden workhorse. She possessed a brilliant mathematical mind. For the past 5 years since she dropped out of her accounting degree at Northwestern to protect her father from a federal indictment, Harley had been cooking the Gallagher books. She managed the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, structured the shell companies in Delaware, and laundered the union kickbacks through legitimate real estate holdings. She was the only reason Thomas Gallagher wasn't sitting in a federal penitentiary. Yet in the ruthless, superficial world of the Mafia, a woman's worth was measured entirely by her waistline and her ability to serve as a beautiful trophy. Her intellect was a mere utility. Her body was a social liability. "Just put on some darker lipstick," Chloe ordered, examining her own flawless reflection in Harley's mirror. "Maybe it will draw attention away from everything else." "Come on, the limousine is downstairs. Judge Henry Caldwell and District Attorney Robert Finch are going to be there tonight. Daddy needs to kiss the ring and I need to secure my future husband." The ride to the Drake Hotel was suffocating. The partition in the stretch, Lincoln was rolled up, leaving Harley trapped in the back with her father's cigar smoke and her sister's relentless narcissism. Thomas spent the entire ride rehearsing his pitch to Leonard Russo, the newly crowned head of the Chicago syndicate. Leonard was a ghost story, whispered in the back rooms of speakeasies and shipping yards. He had taken over the family at 32 after his father was assassinated, brutally purging the ranks of traitors within a single bloody weekend. He was notoriously cold, calculating, and unmarried. Every family in the tri-state area was trying to shove their daughters into his bed, hoping to secure an alliance that came with the protection of his private army. When the limousine pulled up to the glittering entrance of the Drake Hotel, the paparazzi bulbs flashed like lightning. Chloe stepped out first, working the cameras with a practiced, dazzling smile, her crimson dress catching the wind. Thomas followed, adjusting his cufflinks. Harley slid out last, avoiding the cameras, keeping her head down. She felt the heavy, humid Chicago night air settle over her velvet dress, instantly regretting her wardrobe choice. She tugged at the bodice, trying to make herself smaller, a habit she had perfected over 26 years of living in a world that demanded she disappear. But as she walked up the marble steps, a strange electric anticipation settled low in her stomach. Tonight the chessboard was set and the pieces were moving. She just didn't know yet that she was the queen. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was a masterclass in opulent intimidation. 3 massive crystal chandeliers hung from the frescoed ceiling, casting a warm, golden light over the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner, though the music was nearly drowned out by the low, dangerous hum of 100 criminals pretending to be gentlemen. Harley immediately retreated to the shadows, securing a spot behind a towering pillar near the terrace doors. From here she had a clear view of the room, without being subjected to the judgmental stares of the outfit wives who clustered together like vultures in diamonds. She watched the power dynamics unfold with the clinical eye of an auditor. She saw Alderman Thomas Tunney laughing with a known loan shark. She spotted Carmine, the bull del Vecchio, slipping an envelope to a police captain by the ice sculpture. And she watched her father Thomas sweating profusely as he tried to maneuver Chloe into the VIP section, cordoned off by heavy velvet ropes. Then the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sudden silence, but rather a chilling drop in barometric pressure. The string quartet faltered for a half-second before recovering their tempo. Leonard Rousseau had arrived. He walked into the ballroom flanked by 4 men whose tailored suits couldn't hide the bulk of their shoulder holsters, but Leonard himself required no muscle to project power. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo that fit his athletic frame with lethal precision. His hair was dark, neatly styled, but with a slight, untamed wave, and his eyes even from across the room seemed black and piercing. He didn't smile as he accepted a glass of scotch from a trembling waiter. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of an apex predator inspecting a cage full of mice. Every woman in the room straightened her posture. Chloe practically vibrated with ambition. She grabbed Thomas's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his tuxedo sleeve, and began pulling him toward the center of the room, positioning herself directly in Leonard's inevitable path. Harley watched from her corner, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. She felt a pang of profound isolation. She knew the numbers, she knew the ledgers, she knew the secrets of almost every man in this room, yet to them she was invisible. Or worse, an eyesore. About an hour into the gala, the mingling intensified. Leonard had systematically dismantled 3 different business proposals from older bosses with nothing more than a raised eyebrow and a cold refusal. He looked bored. Chloe, sensing her window of opportunity closing, grew desperate. Harley had made the mistake of leaving her safe corner to get a fresh glass of water from the bar. She was trying to navigate back through the dense crowd, her velvet dress brushing against the expensive silks and chiffons of the other women. As she passed the center of the room, She accidentally stepped on the trailing hem of a silver gown worn by one of the Del Vecchio daughters. "Watch it, cow," the woman hissed, yanking her dress away. Harley kept her head down, whispering an apology. But in her haste to retreat, she bumped squarely into Chloe. Chloe had finally managed to position herself just 10 feet away from Leonard Russo, waiting for him to turn around. The collision caused Chloe to stumble, a splash of her champagne spilling onto her own crimson silk. The ballroom around them suddenly went terrifyingly quiet. The minor commotion had drawn the attention of the surrounding circle, including Leonard, who turned his head to look at the disturbance. Chloe's face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Her grand moment, her perfect entrance into Leonard's line of sight, was ruined by the sister she despised. "Are you completely blind, Harley?" Chloe snapped, her voice echoing in the sudden lull of conversation. "I'm sorry, Chloe. Someone pushed me." "Stop talking," Chloe hissed, stepping forward, her voice carrying across the silent floor. She didn't care who was listening. She wanted to distance herself from Harley as violently as possible to save face. "Look at you, sweating in that cheap velvet, taking up half the aisle. Why did Dad even let you out of the house? You're a humiliating embarrassment." Harley froze, the color draining from her face. Dozens of eyes were on her now. She could hear the muffled snickers from the outfit wives. She saw her father standing a few feet away, rigidly looking at the ceiling, refusing to intervene. "Chloe, please," Harley whispered, tears burning the back of her eyes. "Not here." "Yes, here." Chloe laughed, a high, cruel sound that sliced through the room. She looked around, playing to the audience, pointing a manicured finger at her sister's soft, heavy frame. "You think hiding in the corner makes you invisible? It just makes you look pathetic. Look around, Bea. Look at the women in this room. Then look at yourself." Chloe stepped closer, dropping her voice slightly, but still loud enough for the VIP circle to hear. "Nobody wants you. Nobody is ever going to want you. Go wait in the car before you ruin this family's chances completely." The cruelty hung in the air, toxic and heavy. A tear slipped down Harley's cheek, hot and humiliating. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. She wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. She clutched her small evening bag, turned her head, and prepared to flee toward the exit, accepting her defeat, accepting her place in the shadows. But then a deep, gravelly voice echoed through the terrible silence. "I believe you are standing in my way." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Leonard Russo stepped forward. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His jawline was sharp, shadowed with a faint stubble, and his dark eyes held a cold, terrifying fury. But that fury wasn't directed at Harley. Chloe's breath hitched. Her cruel smile instantly morphed into a dazzling, seductive beam. She smoothed her hands over her hips, stepping forward to block Harley entirely. "Mr. Russo," she purred, her voice dripping with honey. "I apologize for the disturbance. My sister is terribly clumsy. I'm Chloe Gallagher." "It is an absolute honor to move," Leonard said. It wasn't a request. It was a single flat syllable that carried the weight of a loaded gun. Chloe blinked, her smile faltering. "Excuse me." "You are blocking my view." Leonard stated, his voice devoid of warmth. He didn't even look at Chloe's face. He looked right past her shoulder. Slowly, agonizingly, Chloe stepped to the side, her face flushing crimson, as a ripple of shocked whispers swept through the crowd. Leonard stepped past the gorgeous, trembling golden child of the Gallagher family and stopped directly in front of Harley. Harley stood paralyzed. She was hyperventilating slightly, the velvet dress constricting her chest. She looked up at the towering Mafia boss, expecting him to order her out of his presence, expecting the final crushing blow of the night. She wiped the tear from her cheek, hastily, her hands shaking. Leonard stared down at her. His gaze wasn't filled with the disgust or pity she was used to. His dark eyes roamed over her face, taking in her wide, panicked green eyes, the soft flush of her cheeks, and the rich, dark waves of her hair. He looked down at the curve of her body in the emerald velvet, and for the first time all evening, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Harley Gallagher. He murmured his voice, low, meant only for her. She gasped softly. You know my name. I make it my business to know the architect behind the most brilliant money-laundering network in the Midwest, he said quietly. Harley's blood ran cold. The ledgers, the shell companies. He knew. Her father always thought he was the mastermind, but Leonard Russo knew exactly who held the reins. Before she could form a panicked reply, the string quartet, terrified by the silence, abruptly began playing a slow, sweeping waltz. Leonard didn't break eye contact. He slowly raised his large, calloused hand, presenting it to her. They are playing a waltz mea bella, and I find myself in need of a partner. The ballroom erupted into a silent frenzy of shock. Thomas Gallagher dropped his cigar. Chloe let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob, her face contorting in absolute disbelief. The most powerful man in Chicago, a man who could have had his pick of actresses and heiresses, was offering his hand to the fat, hidden daughter. Mr. Russo. Harley stammered, her voice trembling. I can't. I don't dance. And everyone is staring. Let them stare, Leonard commanded softly. They stare because they are sheep looking at a wolf. And you, Harley, are no sheep. He stepped half an inch closer, his presence entirely consuming her vision. Take my hand. Show them exactly who you are. A strange, defiant spark ignited in Harley's chest. For 26 years she had been told to hide. She had been mocked, belittled, and pushed into the dark. Her sister's cruel words, "Nobody wants you," still echoed in her ears. But looking into Leonard's eyes, she didn't see pity. She saw recognition. She saw a king looking at a queen. Slowly her trembling hand reached up and rested in his massive palm. Leonard's fingers immediately curled around hers, warm and possessive. He pulled her forward, slipping his other hand around her waist, settling firmly on the curve of her lower back. He didn't hesitate or adjust his grip to hide her size. He held her as if she were the most precious, delicate thing in the room. He guided her straight to the center of the dance floor. The crowd scrambled backward to give them space. As they began to move to the sweeping music, Harley stumbled on the first step. I warned you, she whispered, her cheeks burning. I'm clumsy. You're nervous, he corrected, pulling her a fraction closer. The scent of sandalwood and danger enveloped her. Follow my lead. Just breathe, Harley. She looked up at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Why are you doing this, my sister? She's the one my father brought for you. She's the beautiful one. Leonard scoffed a dark, dangerous sound. Your sister is a loud, empty vessel. I have no use for a woman whose only asset is her reflection. I need a partner who can see the chessboard. I need the woman who successfully hid $3 million from the IRS in a labyrinth of dummy corporations out of the Cayman Islands last year. Harley's breath hitched. If you know that you know, I could go to prison. If I know that, Leonard replied, his eyes dropping to her lips before meeting her gaze again. It means I recognize your genius. Your father is a fool, Harley. He parades a piece of glass around while hiding a diamond in the dark. He spun her gracefully, and for the first time in her life, Harley felt weightless. The heavy velvet dress didn't feel restrictive anymore. It felt like royal armor. As they rotated, she caught sight of Chloe, standing on the edge of the dance floor, her face pale tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her perfectly contoured cheeks. Thomas Gallagher looked like he was going to pass out. "She told you that nobody wants you," Leonard whispered, his hand tightening on her waist, pulling her flush against his chest so the entire room could see the intimacy of their proximity. His voice grew dark, vibrating with a possessive threat. "She is wrong. I want you, Harley, and what the syndicate wants, it keeps." Harley looked up into the eyes of the Devil of Chicago, realizing with a terrifying thrill that her life in the shadows was over. The game had just begun, and the king had just chosen his queen. The final sweeping chord of the Vivaldi waltz faded into the cavernous ceiling of the grand ballroom. For a prolonged, agonizing second, the room remained suspended in absolute silence. Harley Gallagher stood in the center of the Drake Hotel's dance floor, her chest heaving against the emerald velvet of her gown, her hand still securely trapped within the warm, calloused grip of Leonard Russo. She expected him to bow, offer a polite nod, and return her to the suffocating reality of her family's corner. Instead, Leonard's grip tightened. He didn't look at the hundreds of gaping faces surrounding them. He kept his dark, piercing gaze locked entirely on her. "We are leaving," he stated, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "Leaving?" Harley whispered, her pulse skyrocketing. "But the gala?" "My father, your father," Leonard interrupted, his tone laced with chilling indifference, "has outlived his usefulness tonight. Come." He turned, pulling her gently but immovably in his wake. The crowd scrambled out of their path, a parting sea of silk diamonds and sheer terror. As they neared the exit, Thomas Gallagher finally broke through the paralysis that had gripped the room. He lunged forward, his face a mottled, sweaty purple with Chloe trailing right behind him, her eyes wide with a manic blend of fury and panic. "Mr. Russo, Leonard, please!" Thomas gasped, stepping into their path. His eyes darted frantically between the Mafia boss and his eldest daughter. "This is a misunderstanding. Chloe is right here. Harley is just... She's not well, she's confused. She needs to go home." Leonard stopped. The air around him seemed to plummet to freezing temperatures. His 4 suited bodyguards instantly materialized from the shadows, their hands hovering dangerously close to the lapels of their jackets. "The only one confused here is you, Thomas," Leonard said smoothly. He didn't raise his voice, but the lethal promise in his tone made Thomas physically recoil. "I suggest you return to the bar. Drink to your continued breathing. Because if you step in front of me again, I will ensure it is your last step. In the syndicate, power isn't taken with a shout. It's executed in a whisper. An old Chicago outfit proverb. But she's my daughter." Thomas sputtered a desperate, pathetic final stand. "She was your daughter," Leonard corrected coldly. "Now she is my asset." Chloe let out a strangled, furious sob. "Her you want her. Look at her. She's a whale. She's nothing." Leonard didn't even grant Chloe the dignity of looking at her. He simply tilted his head toward his lead bodyguard, a massive man named Matteo. "Matteo, if the blonde speaks again, remove her tongue." Chloe snapped her mouth shut, slapping a hand over her own lips, her eyes terrified. Leonard guided Harley out the heavy brass doors of the hotel and into the humid electric Chicago night. A convoy of 3 black-armored Maybachs sat idling at the curb. The paparazzi, sensing blood in the water, began snapping photos furiously. Harley instinctively raised a hand to shield her face, deeply ashamed of how she must look, a heavy, flushed woman being dragged into the underworld by the city's reigning king. Leonard noticed. He stopped on the sidewalk, uncaring of the flashing bulbs. He reached out, taking her trembling hand, and gently lowering it from her face. "Never hide your face, Harley," he commanded softly, brushing a stray dark curl behind her ear. "From this night forward, let them look. Let them see exactly who holds my attention." He guided her into the cavernous, leather-scented interior of the middle Maybach. The partition was already up. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, merging onto the glittering stretch of Lakeshore Drive, Harley pressed herself against the passenger door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You just kidnapped me," she breathed out, staring at the blurred city lights reflecting off the bulletproof glass. "I liberated you," Leonard corrected, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter built into the console. He offered her the glass of Macallan 25. When she shook her head, he took a slow sip. "Your father's books are a house of cards, Harley. You've done a masterful job keeping the federal auditors at bay, but you can only patch a sinking ship for so long." Harley's professional instincts immediately flared momentarily, overriding her panic. "The accounts are sound. I diversified the shipping union kickbacks through 3 different shell companies in Delaware." "Yes," Leonard agreed, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips. "You did. But your father got greedy. He borrowed outside of the syndicate to fund a high-stakes gambling habit." Leonard reached into the leather compartment beside him and tossed a thick manila folder onto her lap. Harley hesitated, then opened it. Her eyes scanned the documents, her mathematical mind processing the terrible reality in seconds. Thomas Gallagher's hidden liabilities. Creditor, the Petrov Bratva, Russian syndicate. Principal debt, $4.5 million. Accumulated interest, $1.2 million. Collateral offered, the Gallagher Southside Docks Syndicate territory. Harley felt the blood drain from her face. He leveraged syndicate territory to the Russians. He doesn't even own the docks. He just manages them for you. "Exactly," Leonard said, his eyes darkening. "It is an act of treason. By outfit law, I should have had him executed in the coat check room tonight. The entire Gallagher family should be resting at the bottom of Lake Michigan by sunrise." Harley squeezed her eyes shut, a wave of profound nausea washing over her. "So why didn't you? Why am I in this car?" Leonard shifted, closing the distance between them. The sheer size of him, the heat radiating from his body, made the spacious Maybach feel suffocatingly small. He reached out his large fingers, gently cupping her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Because I reviewed the digital footprints of those Delaware shell companies." He murmured, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her jawline. "I saw the algorithm you built to randomly generate invoices that perfectly match the union's legitimate operating costs. It is the most beautiful piece of forensic accounting I have ever seen. You are a prodigy, Harley." "I'm a criminal," she whispered, her breath hitching as his thumb brushed her lower lip. "We are all criminals, Mia Bella," Leonard replied, his voice a velvet caress. "But very few of us are artists. I paid your father's debt to the Russians yesterday. I now own him. I own his territory. And in exchange for his miserable life, I claimed his most valuable asset." Harley swallowed hard, her insecurities screaming in her mind. "You want me to cook your books?" "I want you to manage my empire," Leonard corrected. "And I want you." "You don't," she blurted out, the painful, raw truth tearing from her throat. She pushed his hand away, retreating into the corner of the seat. "Don't play games with me, Mr. Russo. I know what I look like. I have mirrors. I see the women you are photographed with, models, actresses, women like my sister. You want my brain? Fine. I will work for you to save my family. But do not mock me by pretending you desire me." The silence in the car became instantly heavy, charged with a sudden violent tension. Leonard set his crystal glass down. He moved so fast she didn't have time to flinch. Suddenly, he was looming over her, his hands planted on the leather seat on either side of her waist, trapping her against the door. "Do I strike you as a man who plays games?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous feral growl. "Do you think I care about the opinions of superficial socialites and weak men? The women you speak of are hollow. They break when the wind blows." He leaned in closer, his lips mere inches from hers, his gaze dropping to the swell of her cleavage, straining against the emerald velvet. "I look at you, Harley, and I see a woman. Soft where a woman should be soft, brilliant where it matters, and resilient enough to survive in a house that hated you. I don't want a fragile porcelain doll. I want a queen who can hold my empire together while I burn the rest of the city down." Harley trembled, completely overwhelmed. No man had ever spoken to her like this. No man had ever looked at her body with hunger instead of disgust. "Tomorrow," Leonard whispered, pulling back just slightly, though his eyes never left hers. "You will begin auditing the Russo syndicate. But tonight you will sleep in my bed, and you will begin to unlearn every lie your family ever told you about your worth." The Russo estate in Lake Forest was a sprawling Gothic revival fortress hidden behind 10-foot wrought-iron gates and a dense perimeter of ancient oak trees. It was a place of dark marble vaulted ceilings and terrifying silence. For the past 48 hours it had also been Harley's prison and her paradise. True to his word, Leonard had not forced himself upon her that first night. He had simply given her one of his oversized black silk dress shirts to sleep in, pulled her against his chest in the massive king-sized bed, and held her. For a woman who had been starved of physical affection her entire life, the feeling of a powerful, dangerous man wrapping himself around her thick curves protectively was completely intoxicating. Now, on her third day, Harley sat in Leonard's private, subterranean office. It was a high-tech bunker, disguised as a classic library, filled with servers, encrypted mainframes, and towering stacks of physical ledgers. She was dressed in a pair of soft black leggings and a cashmere sweater that one of Leonard's staff had procured for her, her hair tied up in a messy bun, a pair of reading glasses perched on her nose. She was in her element, and she was terrified of what she had just found. Leonard was sitting across the room in a leather wingback chair, cleaning a custom 1911 pistol with terrifying methodical precision. He watched her constantly. Every time she looked up from the monitors, she caught his dark eyes, tracking her movements, a low, simmering possessiveness in his gaze. "You're frowning, Mia Bella," Leonard observed, snapping the slide of the pistol back. "Did you find a math error? Or are you just displeased with my company?" Harley took a shaky breath, pulling off her glasses. "Leonard, you need to look at this." He set the weapon down, immediately crossing the room in 3 long strides. He stood behind her chair, resting his large hands gently on her shoulders. The warmth of his touch sent a familiar shiver down her spine. "Show me." Harley tapped the keyboard, bringing up a complex spreadsheet she had spent the last 10 hours cross-referencing. "I started auditing the Southside construction contracts," she explained, pointing to the screen. "You have 3 major high-rise developments currently funneling clean cash back into the central holding account. But the margins were off, just by a fraction of a percent. Skimming," Leonard said, his voice instantly dropping 10 degrees. "Someone is stealing from me." "It's worse than skimming," Harley said, her finger tracing a line on the monitor. "If it were just a greedy contractor, the money would disappear into a private offshore account. But this money isn't disappearing. It's being systematically rerouted." She hit a key, bringing up a table she had constructed to track the phantom funds. Financial routing discrepancies, Q1 to Q2. construction site, reported expense, actual expense variance, stolen routing destination, River North Tower, 12, 5,011.2 million 1.3 million, Phantom LLC Bermuda, West Loop, condos, 8.2 million, 7.5 million, 0.7 million, Phantom LLC Bermuda, Navy Pier, expansion, 15.0 million, 13.1 million 1.9 million, Phantom LLC, Bermuda total variance, 3.9 million. Almost $4 million in 6 months, Harley whispered. But here is the twist. I cracked the ownership structure of the Bermuda LLC. It's a nested doll of corporations, but the ultimate beneficiary. She swallowed hard, looking up at him. It's Carmine Del Vecchio. Leonard went completely still. The silence in the office was deafening. The Del Vecchio family was their largest rival. They had been maintaining a fragile, blood-soaked truce for 3 years. The Del Vecchios don't have the internal access required to alter my ledgers, Leonard stated, his voice a lethal, vibrating hum. Someone on the inside is feeding them. I know, Harley said, her voice trembling slightly. She hated being the bearer of this news. I tracked the digital authorization codes that approved the inflated expense reports. Leonard's grip on her shoulders tightened painfully for a fraction of a second before he consciously relaxed his hands, tracing his thumbs soothingly over her collarbones. Give me the name, Harley. It's Leo Rossi, she whispered. Leo Rossi. Leonard's underboss, his closest friend, a man who had taken bullets for Leonard's father. Leonard didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. The sheer violence of his stillness was infinitely more terrifying. He stared at the glowing monitor, his dark eyes turning flat and dead. When he finally spoke, it sounded like a door slamming shut on a tomb. Print the routing documents, Leonard ordered quietly. Put them in a physical folder. Harley quickly complied, her hands shaking as she gathered the papers from the laser printer. She handed the file up to him. Leonard took the folder, leaning down to press a hard, lingering kiss to the crown of her head. Stay in this room. Do not open the door for anyone except me or Matteo. Do you understand? Leonard, what are you going to do? She asked, her heart pounding. I am going to balance the books, he replied softly. He walked out of the library, the heavy oak doors locking with a mechanical click behind him. For the next 2 hours, Harley sat in the agonizing silence of the bunker. She tried to return to the spreadsheets, but her mind was racing. She had just signed a man's death warrant with a keyboard. This was the reality of the world she had truly stepped into. It wasn't just numbers on a page anymore. It was blood. Suddenly, her secure cell phone, a burner Leonard had given her, buzzed on the desk. She jumped, staring at the screen. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. Hello. Well, the little piglet finally learned how to squeal. Harley's blood turned to ice. It was Leo Rossi. Leo. She breathed, her eyes darting around the empty locked room. You think you're pretty smart, don't you, Gallagher? Leo sneered, the sound of wind and traffic roaring in the background. A fat little math genius playing gangster. You should have stayed in the shadows where you belong. Leonard knows, Harley said, trying to keep her voice steady. He has the files, Leo. I know he has the files. Leo barked, a panicked edge bleeding into his voice. Because he just walked into my safe house and shot 3 of my men. I barely made it out the back. But here's the thing, sweetheart. I didn't steal that money just to get rich. I stole it to buy an army. The Del Vecchios are moving on the Russo estate tonight. Right now. Harley shot up from her chair. You're lying. Look at the security monitors, bitch. Leo laughed, a ragged, desperate sound. Leonard took his main strike team to hunt me down. He left you with a skeleton crew. By the time he realizes he's been played, Carmine's boys are going to be dragging you out of that bunker by your hair. You're going to die for a man who only wanted you as a calculator." The line went dead. Harley threw the phone onto the desk and lunged for the security console. She rapidly typed in the override commands Leonard had taught her yesterday. The 4 large flat-screen monitors above the desk flickered to life, displaying the external cameras of the Lake Forest estate. Her breath caught in her throat. 3 black, unmarked vans had just crashed through the main wrought-iron gates. Dozens of heavily armed men were pouring out onto the manicured lawns, engaging the few Russo guards left behind. The muzzle flashes lit up the dark monitors like lightning. They were coming for her. Harley backed away from the console, her chest heaving. She was trapped in a subterranean room. The heavy oak doors were bulletproof, but they wouldn't withstand breaching explosives. She looked around the room frantically. She wasn't a fighter. She was an accountant. But as her eyes landed on the sprawling mainframe servers humming in the corner, a desperate, brilliant plan formed in her mind. If they want the money, she thought, her hands flying to the keyboard, "I'll show them exactly where it is." The muffled rhythmic thud of automatic gunfire echoed through the reinforced ceiling of the subterranean bunker, vibrating against Harley's teeth. Dust shook loose from the vaulted brick ceiling, drifting down onto the glowing monitors. She was entirely alone, buried beneath a war zone, armed with nothing but a keyboard and a brilliant, desperate mind. Leo Rossi had thought he was taunting a terrified, helpless woman. He had fundamentally misunderstood who Harley Gallagher was. She had survived 26 years in a family that treated her like a disease. She had learned to endure, to calculate, and to strike only when the odds were absolute. Her fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, the clacking sound sharp and frantic against the distant explosions above. If Leo and the Del Vecchio family were launching a full-scale siege on the Russo estate, it wasn't just to assassinate Leonard. This was a hostile takeover. They wanted the territory, they wanted the blood, but most importantly, they wanted the money. The Russo syndicate controlled the largest liquid cash reserves in the Midwest. If they want the empire, Harley thought her jaw set her green eyes, reflecting the harsh blue light of the monitors. "I'll make sure there is nothing left to conquer." She bypassed the standard security protocols using the root access codes Leonard had entrusted her with just 24 hours prior. She dove directly into the syndicate's central nervous system. First, she targeted the $3.9 million Leo had stolen. She traced the Bermuda LLC, fractured the holding account, and initiated a wire transfer, sending the funds into a randomized, heavily encrypted cryptographic ledger that only she possessed the seed phrase for. But she didn't stop there. A heavy, terrifying boom shook the walls. They had breached the interior mansion. They were in the hallways. Harley ignored the adrenaline spiking in her veins. She opened a secondary terminal and initiated an offensive hack. She knew the Del Vecchio family's financial structure. She had spent years analyzing their shell companies to keep her father's ledgers insulated from them. Carmine Del Vecchio was old school. He kept his primary operational funds, nearly $80 million used for payroll bribes and weapons trafficking, in a series of supposedly secure Cayman Island trusts, managed by a corrupt Swiss banking firm, Bauer & Co. With a few keystrokes utilizing a back door she had discovered years ago, but never dared to exploit, Harley breached the Del Vecchio mainframes. Transfer initiated, the screen flashed. She was draining them. Every single cent of the Del Vecchio empire was being siphoned, routed through 12 different proxy servers, and dumped into the same impenetrable cryptographic vault. She was burying the rival family's entire fortune in a digital grave. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library groaned. The screech of a high-powered drill biting into the reinforced steel frame, pierced the air. They were at the bunker. Harley hit enter on the final command. A loading bar appeared on the screen. 70%, 80%. "Come on," she whispered, her hands shaking as she stared at the screen. 90%. "Stand back." A muffled voice roared from the other side of the door. Harley dove beneath the massive solid mahogany desk, curling her heavy frame into a tight ball, throwing her arms over her head. The explosion was deafening. The sound waves punched the air from her lungs as the heavy oak doors were blown entirely off their steel hinges, crashing into the leather wingback chairs in a cloud of splintered wood and thick, choking grey smoke. The smell of C4 and pulverized brick flooded the room. Heavy combat boots crunched over the debris. Through the stinging smoke, Harley saw the laser sights of 3 assault rifles sweep the room before settling directly on the desk she was hiding beneath. "Drag her out," a raspy, nicotine-stained voice commanded. 2 men hauled Harley out from under the desk by her arms. She struggled, kicking out, but they threw her roughly into the center of the room. She landed hard on her knees, her cashmere sweater covered in plaster dust, her dark hair falling out of its messy bun to frame her terrified face. Standing before her, flanked by armed mercenaries, was Carmine Del Vecchio. He was a ruthless man in his late 60s, wearing a bespoke suit that looked entirely out of place amidst the violence. He looked down at her with absolute disgust. "So this is the Gallagher pig that caused all this trouble." Carmine sneered, stepping closer. "Leonard Russo risks an all-out war, and for what a glorified bookkeeper who belongs in a circus." "Don't be too hard on her, Carmine. It's not her fault Leonard has terrible taste." The sheer shock of the second voice made Harley's blood run cold. Stepping through the smoke, perfectly poised in a beige Burberry trench coat over a cocktail dress, was her younger sister. Chloe. "Chloe." Harley gasped, her mind reeling. "What are you doing here?" Chloe offered a wicked, triumphant smile, stepping up beside the rival Mafia boss. "Did you really think I was just going to sit at home and let you humiliate me? B, did you honestly believe the King of Chicago wanted you?" "You're pathetic. Leo Rossi came to me. He told me Leonard was planning to use you as a scapegoat for the feds. I simply provided Leo with the perimeter security codes Dad had on file." "You sold out the estate?" Harley realized horror washing over her. "Chloe, they're going to kill everyone." "I don't care." Chloe snapped her beautiful face, twisting with an ugly, deep-seated jealousy. "You took my moment. You made me look like a fool at the Drake. Now I am going to watch Carmine put a bullet in your head, and then I am going to take my rightful place." Carmine chuckled, raising a silver customized revolver and pointing it directly at Harley's forehead. "Enough family drama. The computers, Gallagher. Unlock the central Russo accounts, transfer the funds to my ledger, and maybe I'll let your sister shoot you herself." Harley stared down the barrel of the gun. Her heart was hammering a frantic, terrifying rhythm against her ribs. But as she looked at her sister's smug face and the arrogant sneer of the rival boss, the fear suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, searing rage. She slowly pushed herself off her knees, standing up to her full height. She didn't shrink away. She squared her broad shoulders, lifting her chin. "You're too late, Carmine," Harley said, her voice eerily calm. Carmine frowned, the gun wavering slightly. "What are you talking about?" Harley gestured to the glowing monitors behind her. "I didn't just lock the Russo accounts. I traced the routing numbers Leo Rossi used. I found your offshore holding companies in the Caymans. Bauer and Company." Carmine's face instantly lost its color. "You're lying." "Look at the screen," Harley commanded, her voice ringing with absolute authority. Carmine forcefully pushed past her, staring at the terminal. The loading bar had vanished. In its place was a flashing red confirmation screen. Funds transferred. Balance $0. $150 million. Harley stated softly, watching the rival boss tremble with sheer panic. Your payroll, your weapons budget, your retirement. It's gone, Carmine. Siphoned into a cryptographic vault that will automatically wipe itself if my heart stops beating. You didn't come here to rob Leonard Russo. You came here to beg me for your own money back. Chloe let out a nervous laugh. She's bluffing, shoot her, Carmine. But Carmine didn't shoot. He dropped the gun to his side, his hands shaking violently as he stared at the empty ledgers. Harley had just checkmated the entire Del Vecchio family without firing a single bullet. Before Carmine could speak, the backup lights in the bunker flickered, died, and plunged the room into pitch blackness. A heavy, terrifying silence fell over the room. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, a voice, as cold and dark as the abyss, echoed through the smoke. No one touches my queen. The emergency generators kicked on a second later, bathing the ruined library in a harsh, pulsing crimson light. Leonard Russo stood in the doorway, looking like the devil incarnate. His midnight blue suit was ruined, splattered with the blood of the men he had slaughtered in the upper halls. In his right hand, he held his custom 1911 pistol. In his left, a terrifying serrated combat knife. Behind him stood Matteo and a dozen of the syndicate's most lethal enforcers. He hadn't fallen for the decoy. "Kill him!" Carmine screamed, diving behind the mahogany desk. The three Del Vecchio mercenaries raised their rifles, but Leonard and his men moved with supernatural speed. The bunker erupted into a deafening roar of point-blank gunfire. Harley covered her ears, dropping to the floor. The firefight lasted exactly 4 seconds. When the ringing in Harley's ears subsided, the mercenaries were dead. Leonard stalked into the room, his dark eyes scanning the chaos until they locked onto Harley. Seeing her unharmed, the murderous tension in his shoulders eased slightly. Then his gaze shifted to the two people cowering behind the desk. "Matteo," Leonard barked. The massive bodyguard hauled Carmine to his feet. Another enforcer grabbed Chloe, who was sobbing hysterically, her designer trench coat ruined with plaster dust. "She took it!" Carmine babbled frantically, pointing a shaking finger at Harley. "The fat bitch took everything, my money, Leonard. Give it back, and we can call a truce. We can walk away." Leonard's jaw clenched. He didn't look at the computer screens. He looked down at the man who had ordered an assault on the woman he claimed. "There are no truces tonight, Carmine," he whispered. With a smooth, practiced motion, Leonard drove his knife directly into Carmine Del Vecchio's chest. The older man gasped, dropping to the floor dead. Chloe screamed, crawling toward Leonard and leaving a streak of blood on the floor. "Leonard, please!" She begged, tears destroying her perfect makeup. "I didn't want this. Leo forced me. I can be whatever you want." "I can be yours." Leonard looked down at the hollow woman at his feet with utter revulsion. He kicked his leg back, breaking her grip, and slowly aimed his pistol directly at her forehead. "Leonard, wait." The voice was soft, but commanded the room instantly. Leonard paused, his finger hovering over the trigger. Harley stood up. Covered in dust, her emerald velvet dress torn at the hem, she looked magnificent. She walked slowly toward the center of the room, stepping over the debris without flinching. Chloe looked up at her eyes wide with desperate hope. Please, tell him. We're family." Harley stared at the woman who had tormented her for 26 years, the woman who had called her a useless embarrassment. "We stopped being family the moment you brought an army to my door," Harley said coldly. She turned to Leonard. "Don't shoot her." Leonard frowned, a dark anger tightening his features. "She betrayed you. The penalty is death, mia bella. Death is a mercy she doesn't deserve," Harley replied, her mathematical mind calculating the ultimate punishment. "She values her beauty, her status, and her wealth above all else. So take it all. Freeze the Gallagher accounts. Evict her from the penthouse. Let her walk out of this estate with nothing but the clothes on her back, and let Chicago know that anyone who gives her $1 or a roof is an enemy of the syndicate." Chloe let out a wail of absolute despair. "No, I'll have nothing. Oh, Wassams. You have exactly what you always told me I had," Harley whispered, leaning down to look her sister dead in the eye. "Nobody wants you." Leonard stared at Harley in profound, terrifying awe. He slowly lowered the gun, a wicked smile curling his lips. "Matteo," Leonard ordered. "Throw the trash onto the street." As Chloe was dragged screaming from the bunker, Leonard dismissed his men. They were finally alone. He dropped his weapons onto the desk, crossed the room, and gripped her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. $150 million, Leonard murmured. "I leave you alone for 2 hours and you conquer an entire crime family." "I told you I was good with numbers," she breathed. "You are a goddamn masterpiece," he growled, crashing his mouth down onto hers. It was a fierce, possessive kiss. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing heavily. "The books are balanced, Mr. Russo," she whispered. "The empire is yours, Mrs. Russo," he corrected softly. Did you gasp at that final twist, Harley proving that true power isn't about fitting into a sample size, but having the brilliance to outsmart the entire underworld is the ultimate revenge. If you loved watching Leonard burn the city down for his queen, smash that like button, share this dramatic story with your friends, and subscribe for more intense, high-stakes Mafia romance audios. What should Harley do with the stolen millions? Let me know in the comments below.